let's explore a powerful, maybe even a little provocative idea. What if human suffering isn't just something religion helps us get through? What if it's the very crucible where our most profound beliefs were actually forged?
You've heard the saying, right? There are no atheists in foxholes. The idea is that when things get really, truly terrifying, everyone starts praying. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if the foxhole, the trauma itself, is what creates the divine in the first place? So to really dig into that question, we can't just jump into ancient texts. No, we've got to start somewhere much closer to home, inside our own heads. We need to look at the biology of belief. And that brings us to this fascinating idea from psychology called terror management theory, or TMT. The core idea is kind of wild. It suggests that a huge chunk of human culture, our art, our governments, and especially our religions, are basically just really elaborate ways we've developed to cope with one single paralyzing fear, the knowledge that one day we're going to die. Here's how it works. Step 1. Unlike most animals, we walk around knowing that our time is limited. Step 2. That knowledge creates this constant low-level hum of anxiety, what psychologists call existential terror. So step 3, to deal with it, we build these big, complex cultural worldviews, and religion is a prime example. And what do? Step 4, they promise us we can live on, either literally in an afterlife, or symbolically through the things we leave behind. So what does this have to do with trauma? Well, when something terrible happens, our brains go into overdrive trying to find a pattern, any pattern, to make sense of the chaos. And what offers a bigger, more complete pattern than religion? It provides the ultimate order, right? A system where everything, even the absolute worst stuff, has a purpose. All right, so that's the theory, but does it actually hold up in the real world? Let's take a look at history. It turns out you can see the fingerprints of this exact process all over some of our most sacred scriptures. Let's start with the Babylonian exile. I mean, you can't get much more traumatic than this. Imagine your entire world is shattered. Your holy city, gone. Your secret temple, a pile of rubble. Your leaders, chained up and marched away. This wasn't just losing a war. For the ancient Israelites, this is a full-blown spiritual crisis. It made them question everything. Did our God just leave us? Or, even worse, was our God defeated? So to survive this, they had to completely reinvent their faith. Look at the shift. Before the trauma, their religion was centered on a place, the temple in Jerusalem. After, it centered on a text they could carry with them, the Torah. Before, the main ritual was animal sacrifice, which you could only do at the temple. After, it became the Sabbath, a ritual of time you could observe literally anywhere. And their God? He went from being a local God tied to one piece of land to a universal God you could connect with no matter where you were. This trauma didn't kill their faith. In a very real way, it created the Judaism we recognize today. And you know what? We see a really similar dynamic at the very beginning of Christianity. Think about it. The core, sounding event, is the public torture and execution of its leader. That is an unbelievably traumatic and shameful event. His followers had to figure out how to process that devastating loss. And what did they do? They took the ultimate symbol of Roman humiliation and defeat, the cross, and transformed it into the central symbol of salvation and love. The entire religion was then shaped around that trauma. Okay, but this isn't just about ancient stuff or old texts. This pattern of creating rituals to cope with catastrophe, it pops up all over the place, across different cultures and different times. Let's fast forward a bit to the 14th century, the Black Death. The scale of this is just mind-boggling. Try to really picture it. More than half of everyone you know, your family, your neighbors, is dead. And not peacefully. It was a horrifying way to die. This was basically a continent-wide case of PTSD. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. We see how different beliefs led to completely different ways of coping. In Christian Europe, the plague was mostly seen as God's punishment for all their sins. The response? Mass panic, public self-punishment. Think of the flagellants whipping themselves in the streets, and a desperate search for someone to blame, which led to horrible violence against minority groups. But in the Muslim world, the dominant view was different. The plague was seen as the will of God, not a punishment for a specific sin. So the response wasn't guilt, it was prayer, asking for relief. And this actually led to more community togetherness, not persecution. Same exact trauma, but the lens of their faith created radically different outcomes. Want a more modern example? One that's just wild? Let's talk about the cargo cults that popped up in the Pacific right after World War II.
This is like watching a new religion being born from trauma right before our eyes.
So here's the story. First, the shock. These isolated island communities suddenly see these massive, advanced armies show up with incredible technology and what seemed like an infinite supply of goods, cargo. Then the trauma. The war ends, the soldiers pack up and leave, and the cargo just stops. Gone. So what did the islanders do? They started new rituals. They built life-size runways out of straw. They carved radios and rifles out of wood. They would march in formation, perfectly mimicking the soldiers they'd seen. Why? Because they believed that if they performed these rituals correctly, they could summon the gods, the soldiers, to come back and bring the cargo with them. It's such a clear, powerful example of how we instinctively create rituals to try and get some control back when our world is turned upside down.
So we've seen how trauma can shape our minds, our history, our rituals. But what if the echo of these events goes even deeper? What if it's actually biological? This is pretty cutting-edge stuff, but science is now starting to suggest that the story doesn't just end with the people who lived through the trauma. The effects might actually be passed down through the generations, leaving a mark on our very biology. And the science behind this is called epigenetics. The easiest way to think about it is like this. Your DNA is the hardware in a computer, the basic code. Epigenetics is the software. It tells the hardware which programs to run and when. And what this field is finding is that our experiences, especially big traumas, can attach little chemical tags or notes to our genes, changing how they work without changing the code itself. And get this, studies on the children and grandchildren of trauma survivors have found that genes that regulate our stress response can actually be changed, sort of switched off. This means the horrible things your great-grandparents went through could have literally changed your biology, predisposing you to react to stress differently. The past isn't just a memory. It can echo right down into our cells. Okay, so we've traveled from the human brain to the Bible, from the Black Death all the way down to our DNA. So let's pull all of these threads together. What is all this really telling us about faith itself? To do that, we need one last piece of the psychological puzzle, something called the just world hypothesis. It's this deep, almost instinctual need we have to believe that the world is fair. Good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. But we all know that's not how it works, right? We see terrible things happen to good people all the time, and that creates this painful clash in our minds. And this is where religion comes in and performs one of its most powerful jobs. It's like a psychological band-aid for that wound. It solves that painful clash by basically saying, don't worry, justice is coming, just not right now. It gets balanced out later, in the afterlife, through karma, or it's all part of some big divine plan we can't see. It makes the randomness and cruelty of the universe something we can actually live with. Maybe the best way to sum it all up is with this idea, that maybe we didn't just build these massive, beautiful cathedrals to praise the light. Maybe we also built them as giant stone fortresses to keep out the terrifying, chaotic dark. So does looking at faith this way mean it's not real? Not at all. It just reframes it. If faith is like the scar tissue that forms over our deepest wounds, both as individuals and as a species, that doesn't make it any less important or any less necessary for survival. In fact, it might make it more so. And it leaves us with one last big question to think about. If this is true, what does it teach us about the incredible, unbreakable link between our suffering, our survival, and our deepest need to find meaning in it all?